Good morning, everyone. My name is Kelly Burgess, and I'm your Allen County Family Consumer Sciences Extension Agent. And this morning or this afternoon, whatever it may be for you, we will be discussing cast iron cooking as our May homemaker lesson for the Mammoth Cave area. So I'm really excited about this lesson. This was a very fun one to put together for me. I learned a little bit in the process of putting together this lesson, and so I hope that you will learn some too. I wanted to start out today by going over the materials that you will receive as your as the lesson leader and as your club members. So I'm going to do a little bit of screen sharing here just to show you everything that's included in your packet. So what I'd like to start out with is the leader guide, and hopefully you will be able to see this just as I have this up. But you can see this is the Cast Iron Cooking Leader's Guide. So the program materials are listed here. There is a Restoring Cast Iron publication, which is from the University of Kentucky. Healthy Cast Iron Cooking Recipes. I have optional here, but I do recommend either your extension agent or your club leader utilizing at least part of this publication from the University of Tennessee. There's a Cleaning and Caring for Cast Iron Skillet exclusive by our food preservation and food safety specialist, Ann Norris. We have a DIY cast iron skillet handle cover activity. This is just a sewing activity that I thought could be fun for you to do either as a club or just as something to take home to do throughout the rest of the month. And then we have cast iron cooking presentation, which is a copy of the PowerPoint slides that I'll be using today. So as you can see, we have on here what all is included in this lesson. And I'll go ahead and stop the share and do a new screen share to show you what else is included. So this is the Healthy Cast Iron Cooking publication. There are multiple pages. This is about a 20-something page document. So there's many recipes to choose from. I will say that the recipe that I chose to make was from this publication from the University of Tennessee, and it was delicious. So I have a pretty good trust that the rest of the recipes in this publication would also be excellent. This is our DIY cast iron skillet handle cover free printable pattern. This is just something that I have found online. It tells you everything that you need for sewing, and we'll talk about why this is a good thing to have. Here is the Restoring Cast Iron publication from University of Kentucky. We'll go over some of what's inside, but I just wanted to show you what that one looked like. And let's see. I think that might be about it as far as those screen shares. So I'll stop that. And then there's one more thing I wanted to show you before we get started today. This is our exclusive. So I didn't put together, there's not a normal size publication just directly on this topic. So the reason is that's the reason I've put different materials together. So this is just a shorter little quick read, but it works well as a supplement along with the other things that we'll be talking about today. So let's go ahead and get to the meat of our presentation, which is cast iron cooking. So hopefully at this point you are seeing my PowerPoint slides. So this video should take a total of about 30 minutes. We've already done our introductory topics and gone over all of that. So we will go over this PowerPoint for probably about 15-ish minutes. And then it will conclude with a cooking demonstration of me doing some work in the cast iron skillet here at the Allen County Extension Office. So without any further ado, let's just go ahead and get started. So as you can see, this is cast iron cooking. And I would like to go over our objectives for today. So I always think it's helpful to know what you'll be learning before we get started. The first thing is identify barriers to using cast iron in the home. Name the benefits of cast iron cookware. Describe how to properly care for your cast iron cookware, which is, I think, where most people probably get hung up. And then we'll practice cooking with cast iron, which is our video that we have a recipe at the end. So just a little bit of history on cast iron. I'm not going to bore you, but as many of you all probably know, there is a company in Tennessee near Chattanooga called Lodge Cast Iron. And a lot of the cast iron that we see in this area probably comes from there. So just a little bit of fun facts history before we jump in too much. In 1877, a man named Joseph Lodge moved to South Pittsburgh, Tennessee. And then it actually started as a foundry in 1896. So they made a variety of cast iron products. And then a little bit later in 1910, the Lodge cast iron opened in place of the foundry. So at first they made all kinds of different items during the Great Depression to keep people employed and to keep business running. And then in the 50s and 60s, they transitioned from a hand pour process to an automated molding process, which was a big step forward as far as technology goes. So they also worked on improving employee benefits, like providing 40-hour work weeks instead of just part-time work. And then in the 1970s, the Lodge cast iron logo was created. So you might recognize the logo that you see on here with the one egg in the skillet is kind of their trademark. They've also received the Tennessee Governor's Award for Excellence in Hazardous Waste Reduction in 1994. And then in 2002, a new product called seasoned cast iron became available. And seasoned cast iron is, it's just pre-seasoned, so it's already ready to use when you purchase it. So that's kind of the main history of that particular cast iron company. Now, as we know, there's many other companies that produce cast iron, so you do not have to purchase it from them. I just thought that was some interesting fun facts since they are our Kentucky neighbors. So let's talk about cast iron as heirlooms. I can say for myself personally that the cast iron that I have in my home was passed down to me from my mother. So I would like to take this opportunity to invite you to pause the video for a moment and have a discussion in your group about if you have any cast iron heirlooms in your family, or if there's a particular piece that you know was given or passed down from a certain family member. So feel free to pause me and have a little discussion amongst yourselves in your group. All right, hopefully you had some great conversations and maybe learned a little bit of something about some of the other homemakers in your group. But a lot of things that are heirlooms, they're special to our family and we might be afraid to use them. So maybe you talked about this in your group, but do you actually use the cast iron that you have, or do you keep it more as just a something to have on the shelf? And why do you not use it if you don't use it? Are you afraid of messing it up? Are you afraid of not knowing exactly how to cook with it? What are some of those barriers to cast iron usage, or what keeps you from using cast iron? You might be concerned about the safety, food safety, because we know that there's different cleaning procedures for cast iron than some other cookware products. So hopefully that'll be something that we can clear up a few of the myths on today. So why should we be concerned with using cast iron? Cast iron is extremely durable, so it is very hard to damage it unless you let it rust, which is still repairable even if it does rust. But other than that, the handle is part of the skillet. It's not going to break off. So if you're looking for something that lasts for a very long time, cast iron is a great choice of product to use because of its long-lasting properties. It's also very reliable. So as you can see below, it holds the heat well and it heats evenly. And so, if you're used to cooking on the same cooktop, sometimes switching up a pan might vary how quickly your food cooks. So cast iron is reliable. You can know and be able to predict how something will cook in it if you've used it frequently enough. It can also withstand very high cooking temperatures. One example of this is being able to take your cast iron skillet from the stovetop and put it into your oven. So a lot of other cookware cannot withstand those oven temperatures, but cast iron can. It's transferable, and that's one property that I really like about cast iron. Oops, I think I skipped a slide. I'm sorry. So let's talk about essential maintenance and care. So we know that it's important to keep our cast iron skillets seasoned and in good condition. So it is true that the skillet must be seasoned in order for it to have the non-stick effect. So we'll talk a little bit more about how to season your skillet, but for now, let's just stick with knowing that that is an essential step in caring for your cast iron skillet. If you're seeing some black flakes around the inside of your skillet, it could be polymerized fat, which just means fat that's changed form in its chemical processes. But it could be from over oiling. So when that too much oil heats up for too long, it causes the fat to change color and state. And so that could be some of the black flakes you're seeing if you have that problem. Cast iron skillets are not meant to use for food storage. So one thing that I have done before is made a cornbread in the skillet and left the cornbread sit in the skillet for, a day or two. That's okay to do, especially if it's at room temperature, but it's not necessarily what they're made for. It is best to take whatever you've made in your skillet out of the skillet and put it in either a glass or plastic container after that. You also do not want to put your cast iron skillet in the dishwasher. That's might be common sense for some, but it's always good to say in case you were wondering. They're also not meant to be microwaved. So there's a few of our modern convenience appliances, such as the dishwasher and microwave, that are not good for cast iron skillets. So just keep that in mind as far as what not to do as far as caring for your skillet. So how should we care for our skillets? What does the cleaning look like? So you do want to clean your skillet immediately after you use it. You don't want to wait and let your skillet sit around for, several days before you clean it. So of course, let it cool off so that you don't burn yourself. But as soon as it's cool, go ahead and start your cleaning process. So the first thing that you'll want to do is to run hot water over it. And sometimes I even skip this step. If there's not things stuck in the skillet, you might not necessarily need to do that. But especially if there's been meat involved, I would recommend running the hot water over it, but don't let it soak in the sink. You don't want it to absorb too much of that water. Experts do disagree about whether or not you should clean your cast iron skillet with soap. Some recommend a mild dish soap, but others recommend no soap at all. So there's not enough information available to know if there is a consensus on this, but just know that there might be kind of two options as far as soap goes. And then we don't want to set our cast iron skillet in our dish dry rack or leave it in the sink to dry. We want to manually dry it with a paper towel or a hand towel or a rag of some sort immediately after it's been washed. After your skillet is dry, what you will do is add some type of oil. I like to use either olive oil or canola oil, and I put it in the skillet just as if I was about to use it to fry an egg or do anything like that. And get that paper towel, maybe a dry one, not the one that you dried it with, but a new paper towel, and just rub that oil all around. I like to get it up the sides. I like to get around the edges, the bottom, everything. That oil will help keep it seasoned and prevent rusting. And then after you've oiled your skillet, you'll hang it or store it in a dry place. So I like to store mine inside my cabinets. I don't really have anywhere to hang them, but some people will hang them above a stairwell going down to a basement or above maybe an island kitchen rack. So any of those are great. And you do want to store it with the lid off. You don't want that moisture to be trapped in there. So if your skillet does happen to come with a lid, just store that lid separately to the side. So what types of products do you need for cleaning your cast iron skillet? You can use a stiff dish brush. That's what is represented by the bright orange and yellow photo with a blue background. Something that has a scrubbing potential, but not something that is too tough. So you can also use a soft sponge, maybe if you just need a kind of wipe, but there's not really a lot of food that's stuck in there, a soft sponge might be plenty. Or you can see my third example is a stainless steel scrubber. However, it is important to note that that is different from steel wool or a scouring pad. And you don't want to use bleach either. So those more harsh cleaners we want to avoid on our cast iron, mainly because they will take off the seasoning. And it takes, if you've cooked with cast iron, it takes a while to get your skillet seasoned up really well. So you don't want to just have that all taken away by using an incorrect cleaning material. Okay, so how to season your cast iron skillet. And this is just a picture of the publication that is provided to you. So you'll have this to read in a bigger form. But it says first, heat the skillet at a high temperature for 1 to 2 hours. Some people will do this on an outdoor fire. Some people will do it by turning the skillet upside down in the oven. So that is one way to do it. And then rub it with oil. So we've talked a little bit about that already, but the goal is to avoid rusting. Now, if your skillet is already rusted, there's a few extra steps before you can get to that part. So step 1 on our publication says remove the rust by scrubbing it with warm water and steel wool. It may take time. So you might be thinking, she just said not to use steel wool. Well, if your skillet is already seasoned and it's in good working order, you don't want to use steel wool. But in this case, we do want to use steel wool to remove the rust if it's already there. So just kind of a distinction there. And then once the rust is removed, wash the pan with lots of hot water and a small amount of mild dish soap. So once again, the dish soap was a controversial cleaning method. If your skillet is already seasoned, you might not want to use the dish soap, but in this case, we're talking about bringing back a cast iron skillet. So you might need a little bit of that dish soap to get some of the gunk out, for lack of a better term. And then we'll rinse it with hot water to remove all of the soap. And then finally dry it with a towel. So this is kind of just a modified version of the normal cleaning process that we've discussed. And then, like I said, you'll cover the entire pan with oil, wipe away any extra. And then this actually recommends to put aluminum foil over the bottom rack of your oven, which is to prevent, the excess oil when it heats up from dripping down into your oven, making it difficult to clean. So cover the bottom rack of the oven with foil and preheat to 450 degrees. Place the oiled pan upside down on the top rack and bake for an hour. So I have heard longer times, like I said, 1 to 2 hours. There's not really a hard and fast rule, but somewhere in that range should generally do it. And then turn off the stove and allow the pan to cool inside. So instead of taking it out of the oven and having an abrupt temperature change, just let it cool down naturally inside the oven. And then after that, you are ready to cook. So hopefully you'll only have to do this once, because after this, you'll know how to take care of your skillet so that it never rusts again. So as I mentioned, cast iron skillets can be used for a variety of cooking methods. It can be seared, or you can use it to sear, I should say, on the stovetop. You can use it to bake in the oven. We've talked about both of those a little bit, but you can also use a cast iron skillet on the grill, or you can use a deeper skillet for deep frying. Or I'll also add pan frying in a more shallow skillet like the one that's pictured on this slide. So this is another opportunity to have a discussion. Feel free to pause this video and talk about, how do you most often use cast iron in your kitchen? All right, hopefully you had some great discussions among your group. Maybe you even have some new ideas for how you'd like to use your own personal cast iron skillet at home. I will share one of my favorite ways to use a cast iron, which is a tradition that I have. I love to use a skillet to make a steak. So you can get whatever your favorite cut of steak is, and create that seasoning, the oil, the butter, herbs, whatever you like to put on it, and sear it in the pan. Now that does cook. I use it to cook the steak completely. That way I don't end up putting it in the oven. But for something bigger, like maybe a roast or a pork loin, you might want to sear it and then put it in the oven. But that's one of my favorite things to use cast iron for, as well as cornbread. Okay, so some extra fun facts about cast iron. Acidic foods will actually remove the seasoning if left in the skillet too long. So you might be able to think of an example of an acidic food off the top of your head, but one example is tomatoes. So especially, I know I mentioned that we don't want to use our skillets for storage, especially not with tomato or other very acidic products. If there is grease left in the skillet, so not the oil that you've applied after you've cleaned it, but if there's grease from whatever you've previously cooked, that can lead to an unpleasant smell. So we don't want to just leave our skillets and not clean them at all, because that could lead to unpleasant odors in your home. If you're using it on a gas stove or on the fire, you don't necessarily want the gas flames to lick up I guess not a fire, just gas. You don't want the flames to lick up the sides. And I didn't find exact reasoning on why that was. I'm guessing it might have something to do with the spread of the heat or the seasoning of the skillet, but it's best to just keep the fire underneath the skillet if it's on a gas stove. If you've cooked with cast iron, you probably know that the handles do get very hot when cooking. There's been a couple times that I forgot about this fact and, realized a little bit too late that the handle was very hot still. So you can see the picture I have on this slide is for the little skillet handle cover. This is similar to the pattern that I've included in the lesson materials. So it looks fairly simple. If you are into sewing or your club would like to do a hands-on activity, I do recommend that you could try this one out as far as a fun little sewing project to keep your hands safe while you're cooking with your cast iron. Preheat the pan slowly for best results. So if you were going to use your skillet in the oven, you might consider leaving the pan in the oven while you preheat, then adding whatever food you're going to add to it and placing it back in the oven, because that lets the pan heat up slowly instead of just putting it in the oven when it's already at its full temperature. And then it's not recommended for boiling water in cast iron. Once again, I don't know the exact reasons behind that. It's just not, it's what it's best used for. I imagine it could have something to do with the seasoning as well. So I did a little bit of internet searching and just found what some of the most common cast iron products were. You've probably seen many of these, but in case you haven't, there's a corn stick pan. I feel like this is a classic. Maybe this was your heirloom piece. There's a reversible grilling griddle. So this is like a flat top, something that you could put over maybe a multi-burner unit or a grill that's grated on one side and flat on the other side. So you could also use it for cooking eggs or pancakes on the flat side, or even sandwiches on the top. A standard 10.5-inch skillet. I feel like when most people think of cast iron, that's generally what they're thinking of. And then a loaf pan. I actually didn't know that there was cast iron loaf pans. For something like a bread or a pound cake, that would be a great use for that. A 6-quart enamel Dutch oven. So you'll notice that the two pieces at the bottom of this slide are they're colored. So it doesn't have that standard cast iron look, but the material that it's made with is still cast iron, even though it is enamel coated. So I thought that was interesting to point out. You can see a Dutch oven and a casserole dish. So those are just a few options. I did want to share a couple of, well, I'll wait till the end so you can see them a little bit bigger. I brought a couple of cast iron pieces with me today. So there is a recap video. I will go to this link and hopefully we'll be able to see this video. I'm sorry about the sound that it just now got added. Alrighty, so that was just a fun little recap video from the North Carolina Cooperative Extension Service. Hopefully you enjoyed that, and I'm sorry about the sound not coming on until a few seconds in. So let's just go ahead and wrap up our slideshow for today. Hopefully you're seeing my PowerPoint again. And I just wanted to share my sources. So like I said, I grabbed some information from North Carolina, from University of Kentucky, and from University of Tennessee Cooperative Extension Services to cover this topic. And then finally, I wanted to introduce our recipe. It is time to cook. Today, you will be watching me make Razzle Dazzle cornbread. And I have to say, it is absolutely delicious. I have tried it already. This is a sweet cornbread that you could really use as a side, as a breakfast, as a dessert, whatever you may enjoy. So that is all the time we have for today. So we'll go ahead and transition into the cooking portion of the video, and hopefully you will enjoy that as well. But I did want to take one quick moment and show you my cast iron skillets. I have a small cast iron skillet that the size is a little bit disproportionate. This is a great one for cooking 1 or 2 eggs. It's shallow, and I have it, I've kept it seasoned. Hopefully you can see it's pretty shiny inside. And this is the paper towel that I store inside of the skillet when I'm not using it. And then here's another skillet that I have a paper towel inside of. It is a larger cast iron skillet. This is the one I was talking about that's great for cooking a steak or a pork loin of some sort. So this is a number 6. I'm not sure exactly what size that means, but I would guess this is probably about a 9-inch skillet. So this one is the brand is Griswold. I'm not sure if you're able to see that on there. Of course, we're not supporting any particular brands. This just happens to be the skillet that I have at home. So these have taken quite a bit of effort to get reseasoned because they weren't exactly in the best of conditions when they were given to me. But I'd like to think that hopefully I have kind of rescued them a little bit from how they were when I first got them. So anyways, let's go ahead and make some cornbread, and please let your FCS agent or your county extension office know if you have any questions. If you have specific questions about the lesson, also feel free to contact the Allen County Cooperative Extension Service. Welcome to the final component of our cast iron cooking homemaker lesson. I have selected a recipe out of the publication that you received as part of your lesson, and this one is called Razzle Dazzle Cornbread. So I figured, what fun would a cast iron cooking lesson be if we didn't have a recipe segment? So anyways, we're gonna make this delicious recipe as part of our program today. And I encourage you, if you would like to make a recipe as part of your club lesson, whether that be the club leader making a recipe ahead of time to bring, or if you have access to facilities, even making something during your meeting. So anyways, we're gonna go ahead and get started. I have 1 cup of self-rising flour. I have 1 cup of self-rising cornmeal. I have 3/4 of a cup of sugar. So this is definitely like a sweeter type of cornbread recipe. And then 1.5 tablespoons of lemon zest. So here's the lemon that I zested. You can see I pretty much just did the whole thing. I didn't really measure. I just, I like lemon zest, so I figured that I would put the whole thing in there. So we're gonna first whisk this. The recipe says to mix. I like to mix dry ingredients with a whisk just because I feel like it helps them to integrate and combine together so much easier. Okay, so there's our dry ingredients all mixed up. We'll set those to the side and go ahead and combine our wet ingredients, which is 3/4 a cup of butter. So that's 1.5 sticks of butter. And I did go ahead and melt that. And the recipe says to let it cool for a little while first. The reason being, when you add the eggs, you don't want the butter to be scalding hot because it's going to cause the eggs to scramble. So this is 2 egg yolks plus 1 full egg. So it's basically the white of 1 egg and 3 yolks. So I've just gone ahead and combined that all into the same bowl. And then let's see, we have 3/4 of a cup of milk. So we'll add this in. And then the remaining sugar that you see there is about 2 tablespoons of sugar. And that will be sprinkled on the top near the end of the cooking process.
So since we don't have those egg yolks broken up yet, I'm going to whisk this as well. And then the final step is as easy as just combining these two, our wet and our dry ingredients together, just like how you would do if you were making muffins. And then after we combine those together, we're going to mix in our raspberries. So that's why it's called Razzle Dazzle cornbread. This is kind of like a sweet, fun, different type of cornbread. Okay, that looks great. It's all mixed together. So let's go ahead and combine this in with our dry ingredients. Super, super easy recipe. Now you'll see my cast iron skillet setting to the side. It is a 9-inch. So that's the size that the recipe recommended. But of course, if you have one that's, you know, slightly bigger or slightly smaller, you can still make this recipe. You might just have to adjust the cooking time a little bit because the thickness might be a little bit different. But no reason not to try it. That publication from the University of Tennessee has a lot of great cast iron cooking recipes. And how we're going to be doing this today is by baking it in the oven. So I have my oven preheated already to 400 degrees. So it is ready to go ahead and be baked as soon as this is finished. So we have all of our ingredients integrated together now. And before we stir in our raspberries, we're going to grease our pan. So my favorite way to grease a skillet is to just open up your stick of butter and just kind of run it along. It does say to season it with shortening. However, I didn't want to buy shortening just for that purpose if you don't keep it in the house already. So it's also perfectly fine to just use butter as your anti-sticking agent in this case. So we have that nicely greased with our butter. So now we can stir in our raspberries, and these are frozen. I have to admit, the grocery store only had a mixed berry medley. There wasn't a option of just raspberries. So there might be a few blackberries mixed in here as well. I'm going to try my best to stir these without letting that pink color bleed too much throughout the whole batter, but we do want to get them integrated and mixed in as good as possible. Okay. If you want it to look pink, then even easier. You don't have to worry about it at all. I do think it helps that they're a little bit frozen, so the color isn't spreading too much. Okay, so that's all mixed together. We'll just go ahead and empty this into our skillet. And this is going to be a delicious treat. Here we go. Bowl tends to be a little bit heavy. Don't want to waste any of that. I really like this recipe because I feel like it could easily be a dessert. It could be a breakfast item. It could be a side with maybe even a salad at lunchtime. You can have it go along with soup or just serve it how you would serve traditional cornbread. So that's all we have to it. I'm going to spread it out easily in the pan so that it's even. We will pop it in our oven. The recipe says for 25 minutes, and then we will sprinkle the sugar on top and bake it for 5 more minutes. So I will show you what it looks like as soon as it's finished. Alrighty, so our Razzle Dazzle cornbread has come out of the oven. As you can see, it's gotten a nice toasty golden color on the top. I thought that the sugar might sink in after I put it on there, but it did not. So it just kind of sits on top of the bread, as you can see. I had to add about 5 to 10 minutes to the cooking time. So it was probably in the oven between 30 and 40 minutes instead of 25 to 30 minutes. So just a little tip in case you do decide to do this one. But let's go ahead and serve it up. We are going to serve it right onto this little plate here. I hope that we see some great colors mixed through it. All right, so there we go. The first piece is always just a little bit rough, as you know, but it smells absolutely delicious. I think that this will be a great recipe Hope that you try this one or one of the other cast iron cooking recipes just to give it a try. So anyways, I hope you enjoy and have learned a lot from this cast iron cooking lesson. If you would, just make sure that you fill out the evaluation and return it to your county FCS agent. And we appreciate you.